stuff.
Because in order to build our nation, we must all exceed our own expectation.
But you don't own me. You can't tell me when or where I'm out of line, or try to get me to live my life according to your rules.
The memories will be so thick, they'll have to brush them away from their faces.
It's not about black eyes or bloody noses in this world. It's life or death, and if you don't toughen up, these streets will eat your ass alive.
The world I knew was quite simple. I didn't know there was such a thing as electricity, or that water could come into the house through a pipe. I never thought about what I looked like. I didn't know what a mirror was.
Can you imagine the freakish stuff, exploitations, and mistreatment that goes on in Hollywood behind closed doors? There's a lot of weird things that's revealed to have been going on in Hollywood over the past few years. It seems as if almost everyone and their grandma is willing to sell their soul for a seat at the table. From Terrence Howard giving the middle finger to the biggest entertainment giants in the game to the iconic Sidney Poitier sticking to his guns, here are all the men who have refused to sell their souls to Hollywood. Denzel Washington.
Hearing me, Frank, my son is sick. That's it. There's nothing else.
I'm assuming all of you received your education and watched SE17.
No fingerprints and no witnesses of any kind.
Nope.
Ain't no way you can top Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman sharing the screen. But what if I told you there was the tiniest possibility of Denzel Washington being in the mix as well? It turns out that before David Fincher finalized the cast, he thought about bagging Denzel. But the Oscar winner looked at the script and was like, hell nah. All the violence and demonic stuff didn't match his vibe. Ghastly was the first thing that popped into his mind. The second was, over my dead body, of course.
And Seven, the movie Seven, the part that Brad Pitt played, they asked me first, and I just thought, this is so dark.
Honestly, the truth is that you'll probably never catch Denzel slipping for the sake of a few zeros. Picture this. You're an up-and-coming actor in the industry, desperate to make your mark on the big screen. Then, imagine you're in a room full of the biggest names in the game. You're this close to closing the deal, but they tell you your character's got to do something that you find humiliating. Most folks would definitely take that role without a second thought. It's acting at the end of the day, isn't it? One might convenience themselves, but not Denzel Washington. Certainly not Denzel.
Being on the stage, the amount of training we had. Sidney Poitier, I was very fortunate. In fact, he came to I talked to him before that, but I think it was when we came to Soldier's Play. And he said, you're good. I got a part in a movie in 1986. I called it The Nigga They Couldn't Kill. Yeah, he was supposed to be, he raped a white woman and they tried to electrocute him, but it didn't work. And he became sort of a cult hero. No, not that one. That was the other awful one. And then they tried to hang him and they tried to do all this stuff. And I had a lot of training day in me. And there were some Jewish people in the audition, and I said, yeah. They said, no, it's funny. It's like they hang them and then they can't. I said, yeah, like you bring some Jewish people into a room and they think it's a shower, but it's gas. And they said, right. I said, right. That ain't funny. So to me, it wasn't funny about putting a rope around my MFN neck either. I made a point. The guy was like, who the hell is this little nigga talking like this? So anyway, make a long story long.
But you won't find him looking back and beating himself up for saying no. He's set for life with $300 million sitting nicely in his bank account at 69 years old.
Stock markets around the world would plummet. Our own economy would collapse overnight. Recession, unemployment, war.
Morgan Freeman. If Morgan Freeman is in the credits, you know the movie will be a banger, or at least full of emotional monologue. The actor first appeared in an uncredited background role in 1964's The Pawnbroker. He disappeared for the next 2 years, but then bam, he wiped the floor in 1989 with 4 movies. He bagged his first Oscar nomination for Jerry Schatzberg's crime thriller, Street Smart, a year later.
Who do you think you patronizing now? She might take that shit, man. I don't.
Morgan should have been beyond happy, except he wasn't. You see, he wasn't a fan of his character in the movie. Shocking, right? It was his first Oscar nomination, but he was not happy with the role that got him a seat at the table. Did he want more screen time? Well, no. So why then? The problem was that Leo Smalls was a violent and manipulative pimp. Besides, do you think Morgan was proud of playing someone nicknamed Fast Black? The man has integrity, after all. And that's when he said to himself, Morgan, you can starve, but you ain't ever playing an intimidating street-level thug again. He explained his thought process during an interview, saying, as soon as you come out with something like that, you get a lot of offers to play that same role again in other films. So Morgan said no to all of them. Today, a thug is very likely the last role he'd play. A mafia boss? Maybe. But if you think he wants to turn back time, well, sorry, I don't think so. That $250 million in the bank at 86 tells me otherwise. He immensely enjoys his reality.
I'm sending it in, personally.
Sidney Poitier. He was the first black actor to win an Academy Award for Best Actor, a brilliant filmographer, and a social activist until his dying breath. No one could do it better than Sidney Poitier. He is the standard.
This kind hasn't been important to me since I was a kid. I've got a thick black skin by now.
This guy's career was about making a statement and letting big-name directors know that the black stereotypes on the screen needed to stop. And there's one reason why he did it all, to push for black excellence. In Poitier's words, he felt like he was representing 15 to 18 million people. But let's be honest, we all need to put food on our tables, and Sidney is not exempt. This period was when he wasn't rolling in millions yet. He needed a job with a daughter under his roof and a second child on the way. On the table was the role of a young man in a 1955 noir movie, The Phoenix City Story, for $700. That was a lot of money back in the day. Some fresh dollar bills that could have easily turned Sidney's life around, at least for a while. But to everyone's surprise, what was his answer? A big fat no. Why? Because the character refused to do something about the fact that his kids were taken out. As a father, Sidney couldn't imagine that. He said, this guy, an average person, his response was nothing. He didn't do anything about that. And I told them that I couldn't play that because that man was a father. And knowing my father and remembering my father, I didn't want to have that kind of record on my plate. I just simply decided not to do it. So it was bye-bye $700 and hello to working in a restaurant for minimum wage. And when things got bad, Sidney had to take out a $75 loan with his furniture as collateral. But the fact that he had $20 million in the bank at the time of his death at the age of 94 in 2022 is proof enough that he didn't have any regrets. Besides, no one can touch his legacy, and his family became better off once he entered the big leagues.
So they sat when they were children and cheered their heroes.
James Earl Jones. Mufasa, Mr. Myrtle, Kibosh, Sirach the Preparer.
You've made an old jazz man happy, Lisa.
I mean, Simba. Luke, I am your father.
James Earl Jones showed everyone how it's done. Let's give it up to him for voicing Darth Vader.
There can be no mistakes.
The man wrote history the day he decided to walk into Goldwyn Studios to record his part in Star Wars.
Robbie and I didn't see you at the presentation of Simba.
One fine day, way back in March 1977, James made a bold decision. He was a professional, wrapping up his recordings at the end of the day. But when it was time for him to collect his paycheck, there was a problem. You see, back then, the studio wasn't loaded. However, they needed to pay everyone who had worked on the movie. So what did the director, George Lucas, do? Well, he gave everyone an option, points or money. Points meant that they would get a share of the movie's future profits. Now, most folks chose points. But Earl Jones was never one to go with the crowd. He chose to take his $7,000 check instead of points. The result? Well, the movie was a hit.
Where is he?
And so, while everyone walked away with tens of millions of dollars, James had to make peace with the 2 zeros on his paycheck. Tough luck, right? But with a legacy that transcends time and $40 million all to his name, I am sure the 93-year-old isn't losing any sleep about what could have been. Terrence Howard. Another actor you can add to the list is Terrence Howard. Do we even need to prove he's the last man on the planet to sell his soul to Hollywood?
Well, if she did, I'll go out and get a little swerve on.
He walked away from one of the biggest giants in the game, Marvel, in the first Iron Man movie.
Next time, baby.
He was right beside Robert Downey Jr. as James Rhodey Rhodes.
I'm surprised. I swear I didn't expect to see you walking around so soon.
However, when it was time to shake hands for the sequel, Terrence walked away. Why? Upper management was trying to lowball him. All the dough was going to RDJ. Sure, he was the face of the franchise, but Terrence wasn't exactly peeling potatoes in the back. He even helped Robert land the role in the first place.
She was like, but Robert really wants to go in, but they won't see him. And I was like, I love Robert. I love what he does. I loved him in Weird Science. I loved him.
Who did they want?
They wanted Clive Davis to play him.
Stark.
Because remember, in the series, War Machine was supposed to take over.
Right.
And I'm like, well, if Robert wants to come in, so I called Avi Arad immediately. He was the producer on it. And I'm like, Avi, I hear Robert wants to come in, but you guys won't even let him audition. He's like, no, we can't bond him. I'm like, instead of the $4.5 you want to give me, why don't you take $1 million for the bond for him if he gets and let him audition, and so he gets the part. Robert is like, I love you. Thank you so much. Da 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 da. Well, when this other thing happened, I'm calling Robert, and he's doing Sherlock Holmes. I called him 27 times. And I'm like, and leave a message. I'm calling his assistant. I'm like, I need the help I gave you. I didn't hear from him until 3 years later. I bumped into him at Brian Grazier's wedding.
So he wasn't about to let Marvel bulldoze him when he handed them the key ingredient on a silver platter.
You know what's so funny? Even though I love Don Cheadle so much and I love what he's done, I still hear a lot of fans asking, am I going to come back and be War Machine? Yeah. Am I going to come back and be War Machine? I think they could have a huge franchise off of it, but
Oh, and he's got the same advice for all the young actors burning with passion.
that's the stuff you've got to watch.
See, that's why you got to clear this stuff up.
You've got to watch the stuff that they put out there, because they're just trying to make money.
Moreover, Terrence disapproves of how Hollyweird is doing things these days. During an interview with Revolt, he said it straight. No sugarcoating. No, but I would like to know the ability of men to be men and people to be people. The man has been demonized. The strength and character and faults that come with a man is necessary for balance. With the new formula, most men are made to be effeminate and not have their power or sense of strength. They allow white men to be able to be strong, but when it's black men, it's seen as a threat. I don't want to remove a few chromosomes to fit in someone's story. So I feel they need to expand their stories to allow men to be men and simultaneously appreciate a woman's beauty. We have to admit that we miss seeing Mr. Howard on the big screen these days. Fortunately, Terrence doesn't have to worry about making ends meet. At 55, he has $5 million to his name, so he can definitely afford to say no. And that's all about the men who refuse to sell their souls to Hollywood. Check out our video on Hollywood won't cast these 13 black actors anymore.